Thank you everyone for joining us on this new episode of CCIR's Student Spotlight. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Aleeza Dhillon. Aleeza is a current 11th grade student at the Valley Stream North High School in New York. During her time at CCIR, she took the course on neuropsychology of the emotions with Dr. Ann Kever from Columbia, currently the University of Toronto. For her final project at CCIR, she is focusing on the relationship between the Big-5 personality traits and teacher burnout and job satisfaction. Today, we're going to learn a little bit about Aleeza, her research, her journey, and her project. But first things first, Aleeza, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So Aleeza, the first thing I'm going to quickly ask you is if you can tell me a little bit about your journey to research. So what motivated you to sort of look at doing a pretty intensive and rigorous research project? And what made you interested in neuropsychology or neuroscience in particular?
So I'm really lucky. I go to a school. We have a lot of course options, and they really do push the science topics on us when we're picking our schedule. So it started in ninth grade when I was selecting the classes I wanted to take in ninth grade. They offered us a course. It's like junior science research, and my favorite teacher, he taught that class, and I had him all my years prior in middle school. And he said he recommended me for the class, and when I took it, I just fell in love with research because I felt it was it's like a place where you can take charge and you can pick what you want to study. And if you're passionate about a topic, it doesn't even feel like you're working. It feels like fun if you're talking and researching about something that you're truly interested in.
Tell me how, so that sounds, that's definitely very much in line with the spirit of how CCIR really wants to be teaching. We really do want students to be pursuing their passions, exploring things that they're interested in. So in your case, Aleeza, you ended up picking a course that's centered around psychology and neuroscience. What about this particular course drew you to it?
So I've always been really interested in neurology. And then not really psychology so much, but when I'm taking AP Bio right now, and we learn a lot about like neurology in the class, and it's really a topic that I find interesting because I want to be a neurosurgeon when I grow up, and I've always wanted to be for like the longest time, and the brain and how it works really interests me. And then I took AP Psychology, and the teacher there, he was like amazing, and he made me fall in love with psychology too. So when I was looking through the courses and I saw the course that combined neurology and psychology, I was like, oh, I have to take this course, and that was my first pick.
Yeah, I'm curious about this interest in becoming a neurosurgeon. How did that happen? Is that remains sort of your overarching goal?
Yeah, so it does remain my overarching goal. I really wanted to be it. I feel like I've always wanted to be a doctor since I was like a little girl. Even growing up, I would write like whenever a teacher asked, I'd say I wanted to be a doctor. And as I grew up and I entered high school and I started taking classes, different sciences, I realized what I truly like is neurology and kind of learning about the brain. And then I want to be a neurosurgeon because I want a job where I can stay active, and me personally, I don't think I would enjoy having like a desk job, and I would enjoy having a job that requires a lot of attention and like movement and focus.
Yeah. So I'll follow up with that with one more question. Have you taken sort of an in-depth neuroscience course before?
No, not a course, but I did do a research program with her name. She's an undergraduate at UC Berkeley, and what we did together was we wrote a research paper. It was not a primary source. We wrote an overview of kind of like the clinical trials in Alzheimer's disease and their failures and how they can be improved upon.
Mm. So yeah, I guess one question I'm curious about is with both of these research experiences now under your belt, how has this shifted your understanding of what it means to want to be a neurosurgeon or your interest in neuroscience?
So I've always wanted to be like a surgeon because I wanted to help people and I thought it'd be a good way to kind of save lives and everything. And then the more I learned like in depth about the science behind it and kind of it's not just saving lives, there's a lot of research too. Like as doctors, they perform a lot of like independent research and I want a job where I still have the opportunity to continue doing research.
And what is it in particular about the brain that makes you so curious about it, I suppose?
So what I find amazing about the brain is that it's kind of just like controlling everything else that's happening in your body. And without it, you wouldn't be able to do anything. Your body wouldn't function properly. And there's so much that goes on and there's so much that can go wrong that it's an area of like huge research can be done regarding so many different parts of it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So one thing I guess I'm now curious about is your experience of working with Anne and also Dr. Ann Kever and also your TA who was a PhD student. I'm curious about how that experience of mentorship and learning differed, let's say, from your previous research experiences with the high school teacher and also with the undergraduate. Were there any sort of similarities? Were there any differences between their approaches?
So I'll start with the differences. I feel in a research class you take in high school or maybe outside, you have one teacher teaching you, and there are usually multiple students. And my class tended to be a big class. It was around 20 kids. So it is hard to get that like one-on-one personal relationship and build it up with the teacher. And also the teacher may not be like completely educated in the topic that you want to research yourself. So I think that's why CCIR Cambridge is such an important program for students to look into because it really does allow you to build that relationship with the mentor who's so well qualified in the topic that you want to learn. And if you have any questions, you can just ask them and they will be so much help in you. They'll help you so much in like developing your project and moving along and getting into a good college and they give you very good recommendations.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So, I mean, Anne's a leading researcher in her field, and the PhD students are usually quite brilliant as well. Um, Tell me a little bit more about this specific course that you guys looked at, the neuropsychology of emotions. What were some of the big themes that you guys talked about, and what in particular ultimately drew you to look at the Big-5 personality traits in particular?
So we did look at a lot of things. We looked at psychological experiments and how they shifted like all our knowledge about psychology today. And we had the lecture on the Big-5 personality traits, I remember I was really interested in them because at the end of each lecture, she would kind of give us a few options about what types of questions we can research based off the topic. And I remember she told us a question about how burnout is like very greatly, it has been found to correlate to the Big-5 personality traits. And I thought that's a really important topic because the education system, like that's where it all starts for students. Like from K through 12, you learn, and that's like the foundation of everything you're going to move on to do in your life. So I thought it's important to dive deeper into that subject area because it impacts almost everybody.
And for those of us who don't know, including myself, can you say a little bit about what the Big-5 personality traits are and roughly how they relate to burnout?
So the Big-5 personality traits, they're extraversion, conscientiousness, agreeableness, neuroticism, and openness. So the major one that has been found to correlate to burnout has been neuroticism because high levels of neuroticism, it puts a lot of stress on your body. That's kind of like what neuroticism means. It's you have very like you take a lot of stress upon yourself. So instead of like finding ways to cope with heavy amounts of workload and pressure from the job, instead of finding healthy ways to cope with it, people who show high levels of neuroticism tend to take it upon themselves in a way that's not always healthy for them physically or mentally.
Um, and so all of that, as someone who is maybe a little bit neurotic, sounds right to me. Um, I'm curious about why then. So tell me a little bit more about what you ended up finding. So you came into the research project with a general understanding of the ways in which neuroticism correlates with certain tendencies towards low job satisfaction and burnout, then you decided to go more in depth and in particular look at teachers and this particular occupation. Can you give us a picture of what you ended up learning and finding?
Yeah, so right now I'm in the middle of my project. So my project's a survey, and I live in New York, so it's going to be focused on New York and like the school districts all throughout New York, because there's been a lot in the news where I live about how their satisfaction rates have dropped. They're complaining, and in my school district, personally, with teachers that I talk to and I consider them to be very well like educated, they also complain sometimes about how the school district doesn't always meet their needs and demands. So I was kind of thinking ways to develop using my research. We can develop ways that will help teachers be more comfortable working there.
And I know that the project is still ongoing, but have you begun thinking about sort of these more positive, constructive measures? So you mentioned you're identifying a problem, but you also want to be exploring potential solutions. Have you sort of already begun exploring this?
So a major thing is the kind of like the psychological support system teachers have. So in schools tend to have they have a school psychologist, but those are mainly for the students. And I've read some more, and it turns out that some schools do have psychologists for their educators, and those educators, when they have access to a professional that can help them deal with maybe if they're feeling they're being underpaid or not feeling totally supported in their workplace, and they talk to psychologists, it actually has been proven that it boosts morale within the workplace.
Hmm. Interesting, interesting. Possibly they could also be paid a little bit more, but that's slightly outside of the scope of your own
Yeah.
research. Um, so I'm also, I think one thing I'm curious about is in the process of, so you mentioned earlier that Anne would give you guys topics at the end of each lecture for you to think about. So as you sort of ventured onwards in your research journey and started actually looking into things, how did you find the support system with your peers, as well as the TA and the faculty in helping you sort of develop and cultivate this research project?
So there was, I believe, 5 people in my group, and I got very close with 2 of them. In fact, the 3 of us, we created a website called Science It, and it's kind of like a science newspaper, and we have writers and editors and other students who all were CCIR alumni now, and we all work to kind of create an area where people can write about things they're passionate about, and then we upload the articles to the website. And as far as my relationship with Dr. Ankever goes, it never went away even after the program ended. She still continues to help me with my research now, and she overviews everything I write. I like finish my review of it and methodology, and I send it to her, and she sent revisions back, and she makes sure every step of the way to give me feedback and help tell me how I can improve upon what I'm currently doing.
Yeah, that's both those things are fantastic to hear. It's so great to it does often surprise me, and it happens way more than I would expect. But even though it's a fully online program, even though you're just a small square on a screen, CCIR students routinely will tell me they make really good friends in their program. And I imagine part of the reason is because CCIR selects for very strange kids who want to spend their summers doing neuroscience research. And they're hard to come by. As someone who's currently getting their PhD, having friends to nerd out about the things that you're nerdy about is really, really quite rare and fantastic. It's also
Yeah.
really great to hear that Anne's continue to support you in your work. Anne's a really, really excellent mentor, and our mentors in general are pretty good at supporting young researchers. That's part of why they do it. All of that makes me think this is roughly the right time to be asking you the question that I ask everybody on these sessions, and it's this. So Doing research, as you know, as you're currently experiencing, is hard. It's grueling work sometimes, even though it's quite fun. Um, what would you say to a student who might now be thinking about doing research, hasn't done research before, and is maybe a little bit daunted by the prospects? What would you say to them, given your experience now?
So I would say the first thing, even if you want to enter the world of research, the most important thing to do is you shouldn't rush what topic you want to pick. You should really, even if you think that you are like 99% sure you want to go into this one field, you should still look at other topics because there's so many different subcategories and different like so many different sciences that people can look into, and it really is important that you truly enjoy what you're researching because it does take a lot of effort and a lot of time, like reading like so many journal articles and educating yourself on the topic that's often very, very complex. And it is hard to teach yourself something that you're not truly interested in. So if you really want to dedicate your time and you want to dedicate all that effort, then you should be doing it towards a cause you're passionate about and a topic that you're truly interested in learning more about.
I think that's fantastic advice. You do have to have the sort of burning love of learning to ultimately do good work in research. You can do mediocre work in research if you don't really care about what you're doing. But research ultimately takes so much time that sheer willpower is not going to cut it. You do need to be actually interested in this stuff. Um, that's really fantastic to hear, Aleeza. It's also fantastic to hear about Science It. We'll do a quick plug here. We'll tell all the listeners to go check out your website. What is the webpage domain, Aleeza?
It is Science It.
Science.it.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
excellent. We'll put that in the YouTube description as well. We'll direct people towards your website as well. But all of that is to say, it's so great to hear all the cool work that you've been doing. It was wonderful to hear about your experience and your journey. And with all of that, I'll just say thank you so much for your time today, and I wish you the best of luck in all your future research endeavors.
Thank you.